In 54 days, you all will be in a coliseum in Richmond, Virginia. The speeches will be done, the lights will be up, the banners will still be hung, and someone will hand you a ballot. And on that ballot will be 3 names: John Brownlee, Ken Cuccinelli, and David Foster. And it's at that time, at that moment, you'll have to decide who you want to represent our party for Attorney General of Virginia. Now, I will concede, I think it's going to be a tough choice. I've had the privilege, and in many ways the honor, of traveling around our great Commonwealth for the last 10.5 months with both of these gentlemen. And they are just that. They are gentlemen. They are good lawyers. They are good people. They have wonderful families. And they are running at great sacrifice to their family. And you should know that. All of us are away from our homes tonight. I live in Roanoke, Virginia with 2 little children, 9 and 6. Dave Foster, I think it was 2 weekends ago, David and I started in Fairfax at a Bob McDonald event, drove to Richmond for a Bob McDonald event. The operative word there is drove. Mr. McDonald flew, Mr. Foster and I drove. And then we ended the evening in Roanoke, and then when that was done, he and his wife went home. That's a long time on the road, long time away from his family. Mr. Cuccinelli's wife delivers her 7th child, I think, in less than a week or 10 days, or he knows the moment. And you know, politicians, we never carry our cell phones for fear it will ring, but he gets a pass, because if it rings, by gosh, he's going. So you got 3 good folks, and you're going to have to make that choice in 54 days. And what I want to do is talk to you a little bit tonight about why I believe that when you make that decision, that you'll check that block for my campaign, and why I believe that my candidacy offers our party the best chance at winning and offers us a candidate who's prepared to serve on day one. So I want to talk to you about a little bit about who I am and why I hope you'll come to this convention and support my campaign. Now, I am the proud son of a public school teacher and a military officer. My father was from a small town out in West Texas called Odessa, Texas. You've been, oh gosh, you've been there.
Yeah, we've been there.
And my mother is from an even smaller town in Wyoming called Casper, Wyoming. That's right. So my parents finished the University of Wyoming, and then my father went into the service. He served 2 tours in Vietnam. He's highly decorated, has a Purple Heart, 2 Silver Stars. And so when I was growing up, we kind of moved all over the world. But when I was 14, I moved to a place called Fairfax, Virginia. Went to Robinson High School up in Fairfax. When I graduated, I went to Washington and Lee University in Lexington, Virginia. And I went there on an ROTC scholarship. I was able to pay my way to school by going into the Army. Now, I have to tell you, at the time, I really thought I had all this figured out. As you know, Washington and Lee's a private school. It's kind of expensive. And we would get this bill. It would have this very high price tag, and then it would say amount due, 0. And I was like, I'm pretty smart. I'm going to get a free ride. Well, I graduated from college with an accounting degree. About 3 months later, I found myself standing in the back of an airplane. I had a parachute on. I was hooked up. This green light flashes, and the jump master looks at me and says, jump. And I was like, oh my God, I'm the dumbest guy. But I did go into the service when I finished college. I volunteered for the infantry. I went to airborne school, ranger school, air assault school, all those things that young folks do. I served 4 years on active duty as an infantry lieutenant, and it was truly the defining time in my life. It was the best thing I ever did. I met a young man back here tonight who's at ODU, I believe he said. And when he's done, he's going into the Marines. He's going to serve his country, and we're proud and honored to have these folks who are willing to serve, and it was important for me. So I did my time in the Army in 4 years, and then I decided I wanted to be a lawyer. So I got out, I went to college in William & Mary, not too far from here, for law school. And then when I finished law school, I got a chance to clerk for a federal judge in a place called Roanoke, Virginia. So I moved west and got a chance to clerk for a wonderful federal judge, a good, tough, law and order conservative, put on the bench by George H.W. Bush. I also met my wife in Roanoke, and the judge actually introduced me, so I'll always be grateful for the judge. So when I finished my clerkship, I had my education. I had served in the military. I was married. And I decided what I wanted to do with my life was go be a prosecutor. I wanted to go to the courtroom and fight for justice. And so I left Roanoke, and my wife and I, we moved to Arlington, Virginia, bought a little house. And for 4 years, I was a local prosecutor in Washington, D.C. For 4 years, I went downtown and prosecuted some of the most violent defendants you can imagine. And I learned a lot in that 4 years. I saw firsthand the sadness, the despair, the heartbreak that comes from drug addiction and drug dealers. I saw what happens when a criminal justice system essentially breaks down and the criminals take over in certain parts of that city, and we know that happens. I also saw the futility of gun control. Now, there may be a lot of different positions on that, but I saw firsthand that gun control doesn't work. Washington, D.C. has some of the strictest gun control laws in the country, and yet it remains a violent city. It doesn't work. If you want a safe society, if you want a safe community, first thing you do is you get good law enforcement, like that man right back there who wears that badge. You know? And then you get good prosecutors. And then you get good conservative judges who know how to deal with violent criminals. That's how you build a safe community. And those were some of the lessons that I learned from my time in D.C. Well, George Bush was elected in 2000, inaugurated in 2001, and then he went out looking for lawyers to join him, to fight violent crime, to fight drug dealers, ultimately to fight the war on terror. And so I applied to be the U.S. Attorney, the United States Attorney for the Western District of Virginia. And I had the strong backing of George Allen, and John Warner, and ultimately John Ashcroft. And on August 30th of 2001, I was appointed United States Attorney for the Western District of Virginia. So my wife and I and our growing family, we moved back to Roanoke, and for the next 7 years, I was the top federal law enforcement officer for over half of the state of Virginia. During that time, I went after some of the baddest guys you know. I went after public officials who became corrupt, like mayors and sheriffs and boards of supervisors. Got the whole board almost in one case. I went after corrupt companies like Purdue Pharma that made OxyContin. This was a Connecticut company that made that drug. It was a powerful drug, and they lied about it. They said the addicts wouldn't like it. They said you could take it at high doses and not suffer withdrawal symptoms. They said you wouldn't get dependent on it. And all of that was false. But they made hundreds of millions of dollars off of it. So we began to investigate them. So they went out and hired Rudy Giuliani to be their lawyer. I remember my first meeting with Mr. Giuliani. He said, "John, we're going to settle this case today." I said, "Mr. Giuliani, I'm a big fan. I have great respect for you. But you represent a criminal enterprise, and I will hold them to account." And so we had many meetings, but the most important one was the last one, because it was in a federal courtroom where his client and the executives of that company came in and pled guilty to lying about that drug. They paid over $630 million in fines and penalties, one of the biggest settlements in the history of this country. We held them to account, and we fought for justice. I've done death penalty cases, and that's important, and it's an issue in this campaign that you need to know about. Why? Because the Attorney General of Virginia, when a death sentence is imposed, that case is then transferred to the office of the Attorney General, and it is the Attorney General who goes up to our higher courts to make certain that justice is done. Now, I've done these cases. I have stood in front of juries and asked that they impose the death penalty, and they have. And it's important, and I'm the only candidate who has done that. And it's important. So I did that for about 7 years. I was United States Attorney for President Bush. And last spring, about this time, I was starting to think about what my future would be, what I would do next. So my wife and I, we talked a lot about it, but my feeling was that my time as a public servant wasn't done. And I looked out at the great Republican Party, and I love my party. And I'm tired of seeing us lose. Much of it's self-inflicted, but I'm tired of it. And so I decided I've been very blessed in my life, and what I would do is step out and offer you my record. And I want to talk to you a little bit about that moment in 54 days when you have to cast your ballot and what I hope you'll be thinking when you do that. The first reason I want you to support me is that I am a conservative. Now, I don't say that to divide. I want to be clear. I want a big party. And I know that on the spectrum of Republicans, people are all over that. And that's okay. Ronald Reagan said, if somebody's with me 80% of the time, they're my friend. And I believe that and I embrace that. I want all of you in this party. We're going to disagree on issues, but I want you in this party. I want independents. I want right-minded Democrats. We've got to attract them if we're going to win. But you need to know about me. And I'm a conservative. I believe life begins at conception. And we have an obligation as a society to protect that human life. It is the most innocent of human life. I believe marriage should be between a man and a woman, despite the fact the Iowa Supreme Court may differ. I believe it's an important value in our state, and it is the law in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I believe the Second Amendment is an individual constitutional right that should be protected. And as your Attorney General, I'll do just that. I believe our immigration laws must be enforced. But as a party, we have to draw a bright line between legal immigration and illegal immigration. And I've done both. When I was United States Attorney, one of my duties was to introduce to the court the new American citizens who were to be sworn in. On the 4th of July, on the steps of Monticello, Thomas Jefferson's great home in Charlottesville, they would have between 75 and 100 folks who were to be sworn in as American citizens. I would actually, the judge would actually open court at Monticello. And I would stand before those folks and I would say, on behalf of the United States of America, I move the following 75 individuals to be sworn in as Americans. The judge would come in and he would order the clerk to swear them in. And they would step away from their country of their birth and they would join us. And that's a powerful thing. As a party, as a people, we need to embrace it. These people have done it right. They have followed the law. And we should embrace them. However, there's the other side, and that's illegal immigration. These are people who didn't follow the law, who came across illegally, and we need to enforce the law. And we need to have a bright line, and we need to embrace legal and enforce the law against illegal. And when the Democrat Party tries to brand us as anti-immigrant, we need to fight back hard, because it's not right and it's not fair. All we want is the law enforced, and we will do that. I believe that we are taxed too much. And I can tell you, as a candidate, I've never voted for a tax increase. And I'm not so sure all of us can say that. And I believe also that we spend too much. If you have any doubt about that, check out the $1 trillion credit cards our new president is creating. We were just talking about it here a minute ago. Think about that. The deficit for this year alone in this country is $1.75 trillion. The budget they just voted on is over $3 trillion. We'll never pay that. We'll never pay the interest on it. And so on those issues that are important to conservatives, I'm a very conservative candidate. However, it takes more than being a conservative to get elected Attorney General. It just does. You've got to be a prosecutor. You've got to be a prosecutor. And what do I mean by that? Well, let me take you back 25 years. The last 6 terms of Attorneys General in the Commonwealth of Virginia. 6 terms. 5 of those 6 were filled by former prosecutors. And every time the voters had to choose between a prosecutor and a non-prosecutor, they picked the prosecutor every single time. Think about that. It's unanimous. Well, the Democrats understand this, and they are going to nominate a prosecutor. His name is Steve Shannon. He's a member of the House of Delegates from Fairfax, and he's a prosecutor. And And so he sits up in Fairfax and he waits for you to make that choice. My recommendation is that you nominate the former U.S. attorney. You nominate the former top federal law enforcement officer to go against their prosecutor, and we will win. It's important to note, I'm the only prosecutor running from our party. As I said, these are good men with great records. Mr. Cuccinelli is a patent lawyer. Mr. Foster is a business lawyer, and these are important parts of the law. But they're not prosecutors. And when we step forward and we run against that Democrat prosecutor, we want to have someone who can match it. And you put the former U.S. attorney on the table, you will do that and then some. The current Attorney General of the state of Colorado, of Wisconsin, of Pennsylvania, of South Carolina, each of those gentlemen are former U.S. attorneys. U.S. attorneys win races for Attorney General. It's just that simple. The third reason, I'm a veteran. And I'm the only veteran running for Attorney General. When I left college, I joined the Army. Is that important? You bet. 15% of the electorate in Virginia are veterans. Think about that. 850,000 voters have worn the uniform of our country. And they tend to vote for their own. There are 14 statewide candidates right now for governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general. There's 14 of us. There's 2 veterans, myself and Bob McDonald. And so what I've told Mr. McDonald is this: I'm going to win this nomination, and then we're going to go to American Legion halls all across Virginia. I'm going to walk in as a member, and then I'm going to introduce the next governor of Virginia, who is also a member. And they will get it. Those veterans will understand the Republican Party is the party of veterans. And they have 2 who have served, and it won't be lost. The next reason, this is a statewide race. We are running for the entire state of Virginia. We have to have candidates who can win statewide. Now, I grew up in Northern Virginia. I grew up in Fairfax. And I know Northern Virginia. I've lived there as a kid, a soldier, a husband, a father, a prosecutor. And I'm going to be able to win up there. I'm going to take my record as U.S. attorney, stand it up to people like Rudy Giuliani. I'm going to take my status as a veteran, and I'm going to win Northern Virginia. But I've been U.S. attorney for the entire western part of Virginia, from Winchester all the way down to Big Stone Gap. And I'm the only candidate who has ties to the West that can have high turnout in the West and at the same time win in Northern Virginia, and then come back east to Norfolk, Hampton Roads, communities just like yours, where there's lots of veterans, and we can win here too. So, what do I offer you at that moment when you have to make your choice? There is a model for victory, and that model is a conservative, a prosecutor, and a veteran who can win statewide. That model is proven. The best evidence of it is Bob McDonald. What was Bob? A conservative? You bet. A prosecutor, a veteran, and someone who could win across the state. It's important. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for letting me come here tonight to talk to you. I want to thank you for your interest and your support of our party. It is on its way back. I can feel it. And so I will conclude with a story. When I was in airborne school, before my first jump, I was on the tarmac down at Fort Benning, Georgia, on the airfield. I had my chute on, and I was standing there getting ready to get on the aircraft, and a sergeant came up to me, and he said, "Lieutenant Brownlee, you look a little nervous." I was like, "Well, Sergeant, I'm very nervous because I'm about ready to get on this plane, and I think you're going to tell me to jump." And he said, "Well, Lieutenant Brownlee, let me give you some advice." I said, "What's that, Sergeant?" He said, "Lieutenant, if you want to be airborne, you got to jump. You got to get on that plane, you got to put on that chute, and when that green light goes off, you got to go." And so I put that same test to you. If you want to have a say about who your leaders are, if you want to pick the person that's going to represent you, the Republican Party, for the next year in this November's election, you gotta go. You gotta go to that convention, and on May 30th, you gotta check that ballot for John Brownlee for Attorney General. And if you do that, you'll have an opportunity to be part of something special. You will pick a new, fresh, bold leader for Virginia that will help turn this state so red the Democrats won't be able to stand it. If you do that, if you stand with me, I'll be there for you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.